Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with the Witherslack Group, experts in special education and care, and John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got two guests on my show today. In the first half of the show, I'm going to be interviewing Sarah Adnuga, who is with us right now. She's a senior leader. She's been an English teacher for a long time and held roles across both curriculum and pastoral. I have so many questions I want to ask her. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm well. Can you hear me? Good morning.
Clearly. Morning. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning.
So I thought I'd start with asking you to just introduce yourself for everyone.
So my name is Sarah Adnuga, and like Yasmin said, I'm a senior leader in an alternative provision where I am in charge of English. So I'm an English lead.
Amazing, thank you. And so I know that you've had like a range of both curriculum and pastoral roles, and that currently you are a senior leader. So could you just briefly tell us across actually, before I ask you that, can you just tell me what actually inspired you to go into teaching?
What inspired me? So I studied English literature as an undergraduate for my degree. And I actually didn't want to become an English teacher. That was the last thing I wanted to become because everybody assumed because I studied English literature, I'd be a teacher. And I remember thinking, what a massive insult. Why would you say that to me? And it's such a shame that sometimes, I guess, like teaching as a profession doesn't appear to be appealing. Even nowadays, when you ask students, they'll say, why would you become a teacher? So I had that mentality. And I wanted to get into like broadcast journalism. And then when I finished my degree, my friend said to me, why don't you consider becoming a teaching assistant whilst you are looking into getting into broadcast journalism? So I thought, great, I'll work in a school as a teaching assistant. And honestly, it was the most rewarding experience of my life, helping those students with particular learning needs, building those relationships with those students, and actually just seeing a difference, like the huge difference that teachers can make to a student's life. You are the person that is equipping them with all the knowledge and the tools they'll need to succeed. And I just thought to myself, I actually want to be at the front. And some of the students would say to me, I really get it when you explain things to me, like, why don't you get to the front and start teaching? And then after that, I decided that, okay, let me become a cover supervisor. So I was a cover supervisor in quite challenging schools in South London. And I was a literacy teacher as well. And I just felt that actually this is my calling. I just enjoy teaching children, and I enjoy seeing the progress they make. And that's how I then decided to do a PGCE. And then, so I'm a teacher.
Oh, Sarah, that's honestly such a lovely story. I feel like I've met now, especially because I'm in alternative provision, I've met a lot of people whose careers started off as TAs or LSAs in schools. But, I feel like in mainstream, it's more common to come across teachers who just did, either PGCE or Teach First and often didn't have any careers before or any other roles in a school before that. So that's really cool and interesting. Have you ever considered, or after you became a teacher, did you ever think about journalism again, or were you just willing to let it go?
Do you know what? I think I was willing to let it go because I don't know how many, I just feel like teaching is a profession that is, you just feel like you're giving something back. It's incredibly rewarding. You learn something new every day, and every day is different. It's exciting. Yes, it's stressful, but I guess you kind of really see the rewards when you've got a student in your class who perhaps hated your subject initially and they love it. You can have like great conversations, debates. And then when you see those students that you've once taught and they're doing amazing things once they left school, you just think to yourself, like, what other job can do that?
Yeah, no, totally. I'm so happy that you did go into teaching. I think that's probably why we've crossed paths. I'm so happy that you did it. And I know that you have such a nurturing personality as well. And I feel like you are
Thank you.
suited to teaching better than anything else. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is when you first went into teaching, did you have any specific like ambitions, like how some people know that they want to go into curriculum or pastoral? And
Mm.
did you feel as well, to just add to that question, did you kind of feel maybe a little bit pigeonholed, or did you feel as though because you're a black teacher that like did you ever hear that you'd be really well suited to pastoral?
No, so I started off with curriculum in teaching and learning, and my biggest thing I would say is teaching and learning. I
Hmm.
think I would describe myself as quite like a dynamic teacher where I like to ensure that students, okay, I remember how bored I would get sometimes if a teacher was constantly talking at me. I'm the type of person that needs to be involved and participating as a student. So I I like to kind of observe my students, and I realize I'm talking too much when I see that their eyes are wandering. So I'd say that my teaching style is quite dynamic, where I try to encourage my students to be independent thinkers, and from then they become more confident in being able to have their own opinions and ideas. So I started off with teaching and learning, and through that it was like teaching and learning mixed with curriculum, designing the curriculum, then mentoring and coaching other teachers in terms of their teaching and learning style and pedagogy. But
Right.
I actually got into pastoral like quite a bit later down the line. So I wouldn't say I was pigeonholed actually. I'd always started off with teaching and learning curriculum. And then I took a break from teaching after about maybe 6 years. And then after 6 years, I thought, let me try something different. And that's when I got into pastoral.
That's really cool, because that's another thing as well. I feel like it's not that common for teachers to have done, a variety of roles in both curriculum and in pastoral. So, it's really nice to hear. Did you find that transition from curriculum into pastoral challenging? Like, what was the transition like?
Do you know what? I did find it challenging because I think with pastoral, it was very much about, okay, so the difference is I felt like with pastoral, you can build relationships with children kind of outside the classroom. But I'm someone who likes to be very creative, and I felt that in the pastoral role, I couldn't be that creative. I could be creative in terms of thinking about what to include in a pastoral curriculum. However, I missed being creative in the classroom. I missed looking at how teachers can improve their pedagogy. And I think that that was the biggest transition for me, kind of moving away from that creativity. I don't know how to explain it, but I would say that that was the biggest challenge, kind of
Yeah,
moving away from that. And also, I find that like in teaching and learning curriculum roles, you have a bit more time
yeah.
to do your work. Whereas in the pastoral role, your time is taken up by so many different behavior incidents. And I just found that frustrating that my time was always taken away and I didn't have the opportunity to strategize. A lot of the time it was like reactive.
Yeah.
Whereas yeah, so that's kind of was the biggest challenge.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely get what you mean. Like pastoral, that's exactly the word that I had in mind. I was thinking it's really reactive in the sense that your
Mm,
role always kind of relies so heavily on the behavior incidents that happen, and
yeah,
you could never plan ahead for those because you don't
no.
know what drama is going to kick off on any given day at school. But that's really really cool. And funnily enough, my next question I was going to ask you is about when you were in curriculum and you were
Mm,
creating schemes of work for English. But I will quickly share, and I won't say who. I earlier this morning sent a text around to some of the teachers that I wanted to listen to the show today, and I mentioned that I was interviewing you, and a certain teacher basically said to me, "Oh, Sarah sent me or shared, these resources with me at the start of the year, and it ended up being the best lesson that I've taught to these particular children." And I thought, "Oh wow, I'm definitely going to mention
oh,
that to Sarah." So I won't tell you who. I'll tell you after
that's
the
so
show.
sweet.
But I think that does lead really nicely into my next question for you, which is when you were creating schemes of work for English, like what did it entail, and do you still use the resources that you made in that role?
Oh, which role do you mean specifically, or do you mean?
So when you were I read
Do you mean like when yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I read your bio on the directory, and
Mm.
it basically said that you had experience creating resources. I think this was in a departmental English role.
Okay, probably lead practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your question is like, what does that entail when I create schemes of work? Like, what does that entail?
Yep.
Okay, so for me, even I would say that I apply this logic now. My goal in terms of leading curriculum is I want children to enjoy English. I want them to see how powerful English is as a subject, but also that it's multifaceted. English is all about being open-minded, independent, critically thinking, kind of asking questions, debating, but expressing those ideas eloquently, verbally, and in writing, but also being able to comprehend words and the power of words. I think words can help to persuade your ideas. They can help to empower you, but at the same time, if you don't have access to vocabulary and words, you can lose out. And I always say to students that, if you're reading a contract and there is a bank that is trying to take advantage of you, how would you know if you don't understand the words that are on the page? But equally, English can help you to escape from the real world. It can give you a sense of escapism and imagination. It's just so all encompassing. Like, English is a wonderful subject, and my vision is for students to understand how amazing English is. So from that, I would think about, okay, what do I want them to leave with in Key Stage 4? So I want them to be able to navigate their way around the world and around society, but also to understand like the power of language. And I know that from that, they need to pass their exams. Okay, that's obvious. Reading, speaking and listening, writing, literacy. But then looking at the text that they have to study. So for Key Stage 4, they look at Shakespeare, 19th century texts, and poetry. But then I think about, okay, how can I introduce those type of texts kind of lower down, but introduce texts that they particularly enjoy? Because if you have a curriculum that's already in place in a school, let's say, for example, I'm going to just kind of throw a text out there like Women in Black. I taught Women in Black at my school last year, and a lot of the students kind of found it really boring. Oh my gosh, so boring. Like, why do we have to do this? And some of the texts are also quite outdated in terms of their ideas, where they're not really relevant to the student nowadays. So most recently, I think what's been grateful about working in this alternative provision is I don't have the liberty of forcing them to do a text. No matter how exciting I try to make the teaching of it, if they don't engage with that text, I've lost them. And I will introduce kind of exciting text. So, for example, I'm going to introduce next year Ghost Boys, which is a text that is about, I mean, no spoilers here, but it's about a Black boy who is killed by a police officer. And this is really relevant to, I guess, society nowadays, especially with the George Floyd incident. And I would say that in my curriculum, I like to look at how the text that I choose to engage the students and ensuring that they develop and learn the key skills that they need to be able to be successful in Key Stage 4 and in life. So that's my main kind of rationale. And in terms of like with poetry, some of the students find poetry daunting. They find it boring. They think to themselves, do you know what, I hate poetry. So yes, they have to study the poetry cluster. So for example, we do like power and conflict in Key Stage 4, but actually, how do I get them to enjoy poetry from early on, from Key Stage 3? And then kind of with that spiraling curriculum, they revisit these skills. And then by Key Stage 4, they get to GC, they're like, do you know what? I've done so much poetry in Key Stage 3, I'm well equipped for Key Stage 4, but actually, how do I lead them into poetry? So songs, they love songs. They love rap. I kind of try and think about the different genres, and then I will kind of get them to think about poetry is everywhere. It's not just in these poems that you see in an anthology. Actually, what's your favorite artist? And your favorite artist is a poet. Then we look at language devices in poetry, and then from that they appreciate that. Oh, okay. Do you know what? Perhaps English isn't so boring. Perhaps poetry isn't that boring. I'm not going to think so narrow-minded. I'm going to be a bit more open-minded. So I hope I've helped to yeah.
Oh, Sarah, honestly, I love that. I love that. And I think it sounds amazing, that you're trying really hard to make the curriculum relevant to, wider societal issues. I really love that. And I was thinking as you were saying, do students still have, I remember when I was at school, we had that anthology that had, I think, 4 poets. Does that exist?
It does still exist. It's been updated and adapted,
wow.
but yeah, we still have those like the same poets from school, like Simon Armitage and Caroline Duffy.
Yeah.
Still in there. Yeah.
I remember that so clearly. I don't know.
And John Agard's.
Does that thing?
Did you do half cast when you were
half
the
cast
poem?
for that?
Yeah, it's not in there anymore now, but
I remember
checking out my history, the newest version.
Oh
most
wow!
recent one.
I actually think I might actually go check it out. I also remember a page that had like a picture, like a drawing of a Jeep, and it was something about
Nothing Happens.
I don't even know what it's called. I don't know what it's called, but it was something about Yam, and
Nothing Happens by Lee. I've got the surname. Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe that still exists. Does the Poetry Live thing, that trip, every year?
Yes.
Oh
yes,
wow,
that still happens. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. But that's really nice to know. Like, I know that not every teacher gets to contribute to what is decided or determined to part of the cut for the curriculum, but that does sound really nice. And I think it is really important for children to be learning about things that maybe are more relevant to the wider society, and I can imagine that does probably increase their interest in certain subjects.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like what you said in terms of not all teachers are consulted. So I think with my teaching, with my leadership style, I like to take more of a collaborative approach where I will meet with my team and ask them, okay, what sort of text do you think would be beneficial for these students that you think they would enjoy? What sort of text have you taught before that you felt were really effective and actually we should continue to teach? What text do you think that we should get rid of? And I just think that it's important to work collaboratively because these same teachers are the ones that are teaching the children who you want to succeed. So it's important that they have a say as well. Because I always felt like sometimes I wanted to say, like, actually, I don't want to teach this text. My students don't respond very well to this text. Like, can we change it? So I kind of appreciate that whole consultation and collaborative approach, which I think is effective.
I love that. Honestly, I love that so much. And also, I have always thought that because English, like everyone knows, English and maths, right? They're really important GCSEs. They're GCSEs that you'll always be asked about wherever you go in life. People always care about what you got in English and maths, and they're the only 2 double-weighted subjects. I do sometimes worry about, do some teachers feel under a lot of pressure? Do they, for that reason, try to stick to what they can or what they know how to teach? Like, do you feel that you ever face kind of pushback sometimes, or have you found collaboration or being collaborative? Have you found it's always kind of worked for you?
So you're right. I think there are some teachers who they don't want to try new texts because of the demands and the pressures to get results, and they feel like, oh, it's going to take more time, and my time is already precious. I don't have that that extra time to try and develop something new. I think that again, perhaps the lack of confidence, maybe they're really used to a text and they're used to teaching it, they've got all the resources there already, so they think, well, what's the point when we've got everything here? But ultimately, I always say, like, the end goal is that we want our students to love English and enjoy English. And if they're not engaging with the text, how will they succeed? How will they love it? And we kind of, I kind of get them to think about the common goal. What's your common goal? And it's about sharing the responsibility. I think that's the thing as well. Like, not everyone needs to or like an individual shouldn't feel like the responsibility is just on them. It's kind of working collaborative and being given the time in school to work collaboratively. So like, for example, like inset days, department meetings. And then I think once you sell it that way, then there is no real way to object, is there? It's like, okay, the outcome is for the students. This is what we want. We want them to love English. And actually, you don't need to worry about developing these schemes of work or resources in your own time. Like, we'll find time in school to do that. And then I think that's when you have your team on side.
I love that so much, Sarah. That's so nice to hear. So for anyone that's joined us now, I'm just currently in the first half of this show today interviewing Sarah Adenuga, who is a senior leader and has held a lot of different roles in the English as an English teacher across various schools. She's now also transitioned to alternative provisions after a really successful career in mainstream. And if anyone wants to ask her any questions, you're more than welcome to jump in at any point. Just request the mic and you're more than welcome to ask any questions. So Sarah, the next question I wanted to ask you about was, what is a pastoral curriculum and what does it entail? Like, what do you do?
So pastoral curriculum is a curriculum outside of the typical academic subjects, and it's a curriculum where it's helping to develop the emotional development and mental development. So anything that is not being provided for in a normal kind of academic curriculum. So thinking about perhaps their mental health, providing them an opportunity to talk about emerging issues in society and their community, equipping them with those skills to be able to make the right decisions, to think about like equality and ensuring that they are I guess integral members of their community and society. So that is more of like the pastoral curriculum. So the emotional and I guess physical and mental well-being of that child and their development and character education. So everything outside of the academic curriculum.
That's really nice. And I really like that you've worked, both in curriculum and in pastoral. It's really nice to hear the collaborative approach that you take as, a curriculum leader, but also how much you plan for and care about the pastoral side of school. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, I know that you've been a racial and social justice facilitator. So I wanted to ask you, like, what is that and what did you have to do in that role? So just tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so that was in my last school, and it was an amazing role because it was in Barking and Dagenham actually, and the whole role was basically you met with other race and social justice, those are my words, facilitators in the borough, and you discussed about how to ensure that your school was inclusive and promoted equality in every facet of the school. So the key areas were curriculum, leadership, and student experiences.
Right.
And we met with all the facilitators in the borough to discuss our schools in those three areas. We developed an action plan in terms of, okay, well, actually, the first thing we did was we like kind of did a review. So kind of reviewed like what is in place at our school already in those three areas and how to improve it. And it was fantastic because in my particular school, we had a working group for those three areas.
Right.
And the head, he was fantastic. Like he was at the forefront of it. And we would meet with him. And I think once you've got the head on sides, it just kind of gives this real importance for this initiative. So we met with the head once every half term in the working group. And as a facilitator, I would go to the meetings with the other facilitators in the borough, kind of bring back what we learned. And in these meetings, they would invite, key people. So they would invite like leaders in the borough. They would, and we would discuss about, okay, how can we ensure that there is inclusivity and equality in our schools? Then from what I've learned, I would come back to the working group, share what I've learned, and then we would think about how to implement it in the school. So that is kind of what that entailed. And it was great because we actually developed more of an inclusive pastoral curriculum from that. We helped to develop more of like student voice, because I created a student voice, a student leadership team actually in my last school, and it was great to kind of use them for this initiative so that they could review their own student experiences. And then from this particular group, we met with heads of departments to think about how to make sure the curriculums are more inclusive, where students feel that the curriculum represents them, so the academic curriculum and the pastoral curriculum. And it was always a work in progress. So it's like, okay, we've done this, how can we move on, how can we do better? Also from that, we were able to review the behavior data, and from the behavior data we saw that Afro-Caribbean boys were overrepresented in the internal exclusion data and detention. So we thought, okay, what's going on here? Is there sort of like unconscious bias training that needs to happen? Is this the data that needs to be shared with staff so they're a bit more aware of, okay, we're realizing that these particular students are being sent out all the time. So I guess the whole initiative is to ensure that we are constantly checking ourselves, kind of looking and reviewing and thinking, are we ensuring that we are inclusive in our practice, that the students feel a sense of belonging in this school? And that's kind of, that was the role.
Sarah, that's honestly, that sounds incredible. And, it sounds like it's really clear that you dedicate a lot of time and effort into, scrutinizing the practices in schools and trying to make the school environment, a safe and happy place for everyone, not just, as an English teacher, but also as a senior leader. I will ask you later on about this student leadership team. The next question. Also, I was going to say, it's also really nice to hear that your head teacher supports that. Like, it's a really time. Like, we will remember earlier this year there was the child Q inquiry that was published, and everyone found out about what had happened at a mainstream school in Hackney. And it did create, at least on Twitter, it created a lot of discussion around the experiences of Black children in city schools. So it's really nice to hear that, and it's extra nice to hear that your head teacher was really supportive of that. Could you actually give us an example of anything that when you went to these meetings across the Barking and Dagenham borough that you picked up on and maybe were able to either introduce or modify in your school? I mean, you gave a really nice example there about the Black boys being overrepresented in detentions and interventions. Is there anything else?
I would say, I'm trying to think, anything in particular.
Another question, Sarah, actually, that kind of is related to the same thing. How did you find the attitude from, or how did the wider staff body in your school take? So was there like a particular way? Did you just used to go to those meetings and then come back and feed back to the head teacher, or was it something that you guys relayed back to all staff in like staff briefings?
So I would relay back to the head teacher and the working group. So there were about five of us in the working group, and each of them was responsible for the strands that I mentioned. And from that, they would go. So let's say that there was one or two people that were responsible for the curriculum aspect. They would put an item in the agenda for the next heads of departments meetings. I would say, right, this is our item for the agenda, race and social justice, and they would feed back to them. And I guess from that, there isn't really opportunity for resistance, because you've got the head who's at the forefront of this, and then you've got your working group. So, and I think ultimately they understood the importance of this initiative and the fact it was for the students to feel a sense of belonging. So, I mean, I guess there might have been just like maybe slight criticism from some people that would kind of say, why do we need to make the curriculum kind of more like, why do we have to address these things in a curriculum? Why do we have to include this just for these particular students? Like, kind of that all lives matter.
Yeah.
All lives matter, like, but what about everyone? However, I guess there were just these silent comments, and that was it. But you kind of just hear these through the grapevine. They don't actually um, try to change what we're doing because of that. But it's just that slight criticism that you might hear, but nothing major.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And honestly, it sounds amazing. And, I do feel like a lot of the time culture is top down. So, if your head teacher, as you said, was really supportive of that, then, that's amazing. And I could see that, kind of trickling down to everybody. And as you said, a lot of the time, criticism is often only really heard through the grapevine and not directly. So, you know,
Mm.
what you did was amazing. So, the next thing I wanted to ask you, you've had roles in both curriculum and pastoral, you've worked in various different schools. What was your favorite role? Which of your roles has been your favorite?
Oh, do you know what? I would say my favorite role was when I was a lead practitioner and a specialist leader of education. So what that meant was I love kind of coaching and mentoring massively, and I love sharing best practice. I get real enjoyment through the like pedagogy and kind of seeing how children learn and the best ways to keep them engaged. Um, I like opportunities of like to be creative, and it's really nice when you kind of pass on that knowledge to other people. And it's nice to see the mentees that you have thrive. Like I've got someone who I coached a couple of years ago, and she kind of messaged me was like, "Oh, I'm now a head of department, and I want to just thank you because I feel like I've learned so much from you, and my teaching style I feel like is like you, and I've become a head of English because of you." So it's nice to hear that. So I think that and it was lovely as an SLE to go into other schools and coach teachers in other schools. So I'd say that that was probably my best role.
Oh, I love that. That is so, so nice. The next question that I wanted to ask you is, why did you transition to alternative provision and what is your role now?
Oh, so why did I transition? That's a really good question. So I transitioned because I wanted to be. So first of all, when I was in mainstream, I honestly felt that I was underrepresented as a Black woman. I was always the only Black woman in SLT. And at times, I felt like my voice wasn't heard. There were things that I felt were important. Like, for example, if I realized in one of the schools that I worked in, I realized that the the safeguarding needs in the local community were really important. Like, for example, the idea of the concern like with gangs and knife crime, and that was something that kind of really worried me. But I
Yeah.
felt that if you have SLT that don't, I guess they can't empathize because they haven't been brought up in a particular area, or they haven't had friends of friends that have experienced those, yeah, they haven't experienced those certain things. And if I wanted to kind of raise my concerns about it, sometimes I wasn't listened to. So this is just an example. And I remember kind of saying like, we need to do more. Um, so I felt like there needs to be more awareness, like where we need to get people to come in and talk about the dangers of kind of like knife crime and gangs and how to spot like grooming, gang grooming. But I really kind of have to push for these things. And then on top of that, you would have, especially like students, like boys in particular, who would lose faith and lose confidence in the education system. And I was really passionate about mentoring. So I thought, right, can we get mentors to come in and speak to some of these students that we feel that we're losing in education? But I just constantly felt like it was such a struggle to try and get my voice heard because, if you've got someone who doesn't look like these kids, someone who hasn't lived in an area like these kids, like they're just going to think, well, I don't see this as important. They can't empathize. And I had that feeling of empathy. And I remember some of the students kind of saying to me that some really challenging students. Actually, they weren't challenging. I guess they were the students that were constantly sent out, and people would label them as challenging, and they would constantly come to my office and they would say to me, "Oh, we're so glad you're here, like, because we finally feel like we're being listened to, and we feel like you care. And if it wasn't for you being here, I would have been permanently excluded by now." And I just remember thinking, like, it's such a shame that they feel this way. And they said, "Oh, we don't really see people that look like you in SLT. When you first came, we thought maybe you were like a mentor. And what other people look like you in your position? The only people that look like you are people that are the cleaners or serving the dinners." I thought, wow, okay, that's quite poignant for them to say that. Then I just thought, I want to kind of make more of a difference in terms of ensuring that these children don't feel that they aren't listened to. And actually, I want to try and think of ways to stop exclusion, or not to stop exclusion, but to reduce it. I would say, like, actually stop it. Yeah, I want to think of ways to stop exclusion. Like, what kind of early intervention can we put in place to stop exclusion? And one of my colleagues actually was kind of saying to me that, "Oh, you're very passionate about equality and justice. Like, have you heard of something called The Difference?" Like, yeah, okay, I have. And then they said, "I think you should try and give this a go and see if you can work in alternative provision." And that's where I am now. And initially, I would never think of working in alternative provision, only because of the stories that you hear and the stigma around alternative provisions. But working in one, it's fantastic. It's the best experience.
Oh, Sarah, honestly, I love that. And it's so nice to hear that, in every role that you've held across mainstream, across different schools, and now even in AP, you've always kind of been driven by this care and concern, quality and inclusion. Honestly, I love that. It's really admirable. And, I feel like in the time that I've known you, I've learned so much from you already.
Thank you.
The next thing I wanted to ask you is, have you noticed any difference between mainstream and alternative provision when it comes to English as a subject specifically? But also feel free to just mention any kind of general difference that you've noticed.
Oh, so the difference between mainstream and alternative provision when it comes to English?
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of English, I'd say the curriculum is the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the curriculum is the same in terms of like the fundamentals are the same, but the difference is the teaching and actually the resources that you would use. So remember before I was saying that in mainstream, you have these set texts that you teach these children, and it's quite, I would say, restrictive. Okay, you have to teach these texts. This is what was on the curriculum, the schemes of work. This is what needs to be done. There's no questions about it. This is what you do. I would say that in alternative provision, it's not like that, because remembering that these children have had a really negative experience in school, they've had a really negative experience in classrooms, and you can't be that restrictive and say, this is the text that you have to study and you need to enjoy this. It's about thinking about the needs of that child. What is it that you will enjoy? How can I get you to enjoy English? So I need to try and introduce a text that I know the majority of these children will enjoy. And it's normally a text that relates to them. No offense, but they're not going to relate to Warhorse. And they aren't going to relate to texts where it's about students about characters that they don't relate to. They just won't be interested in that. So I would say the difference in alternative provision is kind of making that conscious effort to find texts that they find relatable. And once you've got them on side, then I would say with the teaching role, like with the teaching aspect of it, it's different, because you have to kind of be very engaging and dynamic, encouraging. And I would say kind of and also patience. With mainstream, I find that there is less patience for the students. Like, for example, in alternative, you would have students that will put their head on the desk and say, "Right, I'm not in the mood today. I'm really tired." And you are instilling that trauma-informed practice, like where you're thinking about, oh, why are they tired? You know, what's going on, and what can I do to help you? Will this help? There is a lot of adapted resources, adaptive teaching, where you're thinking about the individual needs of that child. I don't feel that that's the same level of care in mainstream. And I appreciate there's serious demands. You know, you've got a class of 30 children, and if you don't have learning support assistant in that class, you don't have that time to sit with that child who's got their head on the desk and say, right, can I, let's talk about this. What can I do to help you? So I would say the major difference is ensuring that the resources and the texts are engaging, relatable, and that you are compassionate, more compassionate. And actually, I would say that my teaching is probably a lot more dynamic and engaging, because again, these children in television have a negative experience of mainstream, and it's trying to get them to enjoy learning again, enjoy being in the classroom again, and being very patient and kind of taking the small wins. Initially, I was quite hard on myself when I started on term provision, because there are times when some of the students wouldn't write anything. And where in mainstream, that would be a massive failure for me. But actually, it's like, okay, did they give verbal contribution in my lesson? Did they actually stay seated in my class? And for that, it's kind of, that's progress for me. So then next lesson, I'm going to aim for them to just write, maybe 2 lines or a paragraph. So I'd say that, yeah, that's kind of.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I honestly love that, Sarah, and I could definitely relate to, just learning to take on the small wins. I totally relate to that, like, having transitioned as well to AP, children, there were some kids at the start of the year that wouldn't even want to come to lessons because they've never had a good experience with science. They don't know you don't have a relationship with them. You only can start building a relationship with them when they actually start attending your lessons. So it was just kind of like this catch-22 where I completely agree with you. Getting some kids to, even at the start of the year, getting them to even come into lessons would be a big win for me, whereas in mainstream that just wouldn't run. Like a child refusing to come to lessons just certainly wasn't something that any teacher in mainstream would tolerate or would have to tolerate, and so I can relate to what you're saying there. And again, it's so nice that you're coming from a place of compassion. You are acknowledging the fact that these students have had a really tough time, and it's a matter of trying to get them interested in learning again. And again, I find that so admirable. So I guess I've only got 2 more questions for you. The next one is, what lessons have you learned in your teaching career along the way?
Lessons. What lessons have I learned? I have learned to actually be kind to yourself. I think when I started my teaching career, in maybe the first 5 years, I would go above and beyond to the detriment of like my own well-being. And sometimes I would say yes to everything, even when I knew that it would take an immense toll on my like mental well-being. And I think it's important to stay true to yourself, and in a diplomatic way, kind of saying when, actually, I can't do this right now, but I will do it at some point. Because ultimately, it's about, I always say that if you don't have your mental health, then you don't have anything really. Like, you need your mental health to function. So I would say like that's one thing I've learned, because I've kind of gone through experiences where I put myself last, and I'll put the job first. And then there are times when I might have needed that support, and I kind of didn't get it, and I could only blame myself. It's like, well, I always sacrificed my time for everything, but I never really put myself first. And I don't want to give too much, but too much detail. But I would say, yeah, put your mental health first. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can. No,
Oh, sorry.
Sarah, no, I totally, honestly, I can really relate to that. I think it's an important message. I think it's something that all teachers should hear. I've seen loads of polls. So even like Tom Rogers, who um is the founder of Teachers Talk Radio, did a poll, I think, on Twitter last weekend, where I think he asked something like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was basically just, it sparked a lot of teachers discussing, why they feel like, they're kind of at their wits end in teaching, and why they're considering quitting. And it's really important thing, Sarah, because I think teaching attracts a lot of teachers that are altruistic, that are above and beyond people, that are really empathetic and compassionate, that always kind of go the extra mile for kids and often for staff. And I think a lot of the time, sadly, there aren't a lot of people who do the same for teachers, and so a lot of the time it's kind of get lost in all that you're doing for others, and never really have anyone really pouring into you. So like, I think that is a really important message, to put your mental health first, and to remember to be yourself. Like, I feel like that is timeless advice for teachers. And finally, the last question I have for you, I hate this question, so I don't even know why I'm asking you, but just out of curiosity, where do you see yourself in education 5 years from now, or even in the future?
Oh, gosh, where do I see myself? Where do I see myself? I guess being at the forefront, being a leader, whatever that looks like, in terms of, I don't know, like being a leader, whatever that looks like. So leading on improving education,
Yeah.
to ensure that it is an enjoyable experience for all students.
Yeah.
Because when I think about education for myself, I don't feel that in my school I was pushed to be the best I can be. I was always given like a limit. And I remember specifically kind of asking some of my teachers, like, how do I do better? And they'll just say, you're doing fine. You're fine the way you are. No, actually, you can always do better. And I felt that, I don't feel like I was pushed enough in school. And I don't feel like I had enough positive role models in school. So I want to be a leader where I improve educational experiences for all, regardless of your protected characteristic, like regardless of who you are, where you're from, like providing the best opportunities,
Oh,
especially for the most vulnerable.
I love that so much, Sarah. Honestly, I love that so much. That is so admirable. And, I really look forward to continuing to learn from you and seeing what it is that you do in education. Thank you so much for joining me for this first half of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Honestly, thank you so much. Feel free to stay if you'd like. For the second half, guys, I'm going to be interviewing a former colleague of mine called Zainab Rabani, who one day in her classroom, I was just in her classroom. This was last academic year. I'm no longer at that school, but last academic year, one day I went to her classroom and I just saw like a stack of folders kind of near her desk. And I was like, what's that? And I grabbed one of them, and I've actually, thanks, Tom, Tom's actually pinned it for me to the top of this spaces if you want to have a look at it. And I basically stumbled across this thing that she has that's called the Wow Book or the Wow Folder. And I took a picture of the front page. So when you first open the folder, there's like this really pretty card that's stuck on there. And it says, Dear student, this folder celebrates exceptional work produced by my students, both past and present. Only the very best work goes in here. Here you will find posters, storyboards, poems, creative writing pieces, extended analytical pieces, and much more. Do flick through the folder so you can see what exceptional work looks like and can take inspiration. Hopefully your work will make it into the special folder too. P.S. A star indicates that the work is a personal favorite of mine. And then it's signed off with her name. It's like the best thing. And I mean it, guys, the best thing I've seen in teaching. I was so taken aback by it. I thought it was amazing. But Zainab, just before I get you to speak, I'm just going to really quickly read the other tweets that are pinned at the top of this spaces. So the first one, #happiness factories across the world. A PE movement is growing. If you want to listen to the voices of cutting edge practitioners and amazing holistic educators, get your copy of Happiness Factories from Amazon Waterstones, and John Cat Ed now, available in paperback and ebook. You can just find that pinned at the top of the spaces. Thank you, Tom. And also the With a Slap group. This is your exclusive invite to unpack your seasonal support pack, filled to the brim with webinars, podcasts, and downloadable hints and tips. It really is worth you taking a few seconds to register. Do it now and thank us later. Again, the link is at the top of the spaces. So Zainab, welcome. Can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. Thank you
Hey,
for
Zainab.
having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. Honestly, I have gone on about your wow folder to anyone, and I mean anyone that's willing to listen. I find it so inspirational, and I've shown so many teachers since I came across it, and I'm so happy that you've joined me today. To follow on from Sarah, you're both really inspiring English teachers, and I'm so happy to have you both on my show today. So, Zainab, I thought it would be good to start with asking you to just introduce yourself for everyone.
My name's Zainab Rabbani. I'm an English teacher at Lister Community School, and I have just entered my 5th year of teaching this year.
Oh, that's lovely. And how have you found teaching so far?
Just a complete joy, everything that I wanted it to be, completely inspirational. Every day is just so magical, and has just surpassed every expectation that I've had of it.
You're just so you're the most positive person I know, in full honesty. I love that. So I wanted to ask, what inspired you to go into teaching?
So what inspired me to get into teaching was just the prospect of touching and impacting thousands of lives in a way which is so tangible and so visible. And for one person to positively affect the life outcomes of so many, to me, is just incredibly humbling. I'm going to make a reference to my favourite politician, Robert Kennedy here, of course.
Love that.
So this was the US president who never was. And when he was asked why he was making a run for president, he simply said, "I wish to serve." And I think that really sums up my own motivations as well. I just wish to serve. RFK also said that most of us won't be able to bend history, but what we can do is create ripples which will create currents. So I guess I wanted to create those ripples that would eventually create currents that could then really shape history. So those are the kind of idealistic, more grander motivations. On a pragmatic level, just being able to share my passion, my love for English, spread knowledge, shape minds, encourage critical thinking, and really make pupils appreciate language and literature and the magic of words. And be able to use words in a way that will move others. And just hopefully creating inquisitive learners as well for life is just a thrilling feeling and the best of feelings.
Oh, Zainab, honestly, you're so honestly. I don't want to sound patronizing, but oh my god, honestly. I wanted to ask, and I feel like I know what you're going to say, but I asked Sarah as well, so I'm going to ask you: did you ever consider any other career?
No, a vociferous no. Excuse me. I never considered any other career. I've always wanted to be an English teacher, and ever since secondary school, I've always wanted to be an English teacher. It was actually in year 9 when I had that kind of epiphany, like this is what I want to do. English was always my favorite subject. I always just had such an affinity with the subject, and I knew that as soon as I knew that I wanted to study literature at university. And then I would do my PhD as soon as I left university and then get straight into teaching.
I love that. And also, I mean, I guess nobody else, well, actually one other person, but nobody would really know this. But Zainab actually teaches in the school that she attended as a student. So she was born and raised in the London Borough of Newham. She grew up as a student in Newham and now works as a teacher in the school that she attended, which I think, just kind of adds to why I think she's such a great teacher. She understands the cultural context of the children in the local area. She understands the culture of the school, and she's played, a really important part in it as both a student in the past and now as a member of staff for the last 5 years. I wanted to ask you, Zainab, what have you enjoyed most in teaching?
I think students everywhere are just so special, and the Lister students are just incredible. I've really enjoyed fostering positive relationships with pupils, seeing pupils make progress right before your very eyes, and just for them to achieve both inside and outside of the classroom. Like a real highlight was one of our students. winning the Jack Petchy Regional Championship, and both Yasmin and I were there to witness it. I think just moments like that just keep you going. You're just like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So the positive relationships, seeing them achieve. And I think of my year 11s as well, who have just left, so the cohort who just left, the outgoing cohort, and who I had for 3 years. So I had them since year 9. And to just see how far they came from year 9, and then the kind of essays they were writing in year 11, again, it's very humbling. And I have, what else I've enjoyed is being shaped by pupils, because with your first question, you asked me what inspired me to get into teaching, and I said kind of, you know, the ability to touch people's lives, etc. But they are touching my life, and they are shaping me, and I'm learning so much from them. And I love that I never stop learning, and I'm constantly surrounded by these kind of highly creative and intuitive human beings who challenge everything and are so critical, and I love that. It's making me it's just making me a better person day by day.
Oh, honestly, I love that so much, Zainab. So my next question for you is, what have you found the most challenging in teaching?
So a bit similar to what Sarah said earlier, in terms of challenge, just I still kind of struggle to have a work-life balance. And the job can be so utterly consuming, and you want to be everything to everyone. And I think just accepting our limitations and the fact that we're not superhuman is wise. So I think that's something I definitely need to work on. And I think that is just our teacher instinct, as Sarah said, is to say yes to everything, but accepting our limitations for sure is something that I can definitely work on.
Oh, I can. Yeah, thank you so much, Zainab. Now, this is a bit I was really looking forward to. Like, I've been talking about this WoW book for so long. Could you please tell us? You know what? For the new people that have joined, let me just repeat it. Okay, so Zainab is an English teacher at the school I used to work at last year, and basically one day in her classroom, and she never mentioned it. She's just so humble. I came across like a stack of folders near her very neat and organized desk, and I just kind of flicked through it, and I discovered that they were labeled. They were called the WoW folders. She had quite a few actually, and on the front there was this lovely card that basically said, you know, she puts her students' best work in there. And so when a child is, you know, feeling a little demotivated, she passes around the folder. Like, everything is so like put in such a like a meticulous order. Everything is kind of protected, either in, you know, it's in like plastic wallets, so like the work can't get damaged. It's just so pretty. Like, it's like the best thing I've seen in teaching. So Zainab, can you tell us about the WoW folders? Like, why did you make them?
Yeah. So the WoW folders are homage to all exceptional work ever produced by my pupils, past and present. It even includes work from my PhD students. So in my PhD year, I would photocopy all of the exceptional work, whether that's in class or from assessments. And when I got to my NQT year and I started at Lister, I started organising everything because obviously I had the desk space. And right now I have 4 binders. Sorry, my voice is going. Excuse me. I have 4 binders. And as you said, everything's really well organized. And within each folder, you can find a wealth of creative writing pieces, essays, posters. So it's not just writing, storyboards too. I'm not just celebrating the written word. In terms of what inspired me to create this, I just wanted to celebrate people's work and give it status. And on a personal level, I do just love cataloguing. And I hated the idea that pupils could be producing all of this exceptional work. It might kind of get read once to a class, they get a round of applause, and that's it. And I think words and art, in the case of the posters and the storyboards, should not have that kind of transience. And the impact of a work should be perennial, because if that's what literature teaches us. So I thought these works deserve preservation. And it also means that for every single task that I give pupils, they have a model and something they can take inspiration from and something to aspire to. It just creates a buzz in the classroom. Like, before doing that task, I can show them all of these amazing works produced by students who, went to the same school as them. And again, that's very empowering. Also, I need to give my sister, Alina, who I know is listening, a shout out for this. Because she did give me inspiration for the WoW folder and kind of how to put it together. So she's definitely the creative force behind this.
Oh, that's honestly so lovely to hear. And honestly, like again, like it reminds me about what Sarah was saying, in terms of, you know, wanting to kind of champion children for the kind
Mm,
of things that they do in an English classroom. It's so nice to hear that you gave a lot of thought to, let me not praise a student's work just once, like let me actually preserve their work, because that's what a lot of being an English teacher, or
mm,
the things you teach as an English teacher, have been
mm.
preserved, and that's why you're teaching them.
Yeah,
And so for you to kind of create like a, maybe like a microcosm of that kind of
yeah.
thing is, it's really really nice to hear. And also shout out to Alina for helping you do that. So what has the people response been? Because I know, like, when I saw that, I was so like taken aback. I found it so inspiring. I was just looking at it, both as the perspective of a teacher myself, but also, thinking back to my own student days. I was thinking, how nice would it have been if, I'd kind of, not as in if my work had been showcased, but I mean, if I
Mm.
had seen my teachers showcase the work of the students that they teach. Like, what has the people response been?
So pupils love these folders and they love reading what pupils before them have written. And as I said, before beginning a task, I will read pieces out from the WOW folder, and my pupils always kind of buzz for the piece and they applaud, and they also feel motivated to write something of a similar standard so that they too can kind of inspire that sort of response, like with the applauding and the enthusiasm of peers. Like, it's nice for present day students to think that, oh, 3, 4 years from now, when I've left the school, Miss Rabani could be reading my piece to students, and that piece should be getting this kind of love and appreciation. Also, having these folders has really set a bar, because I always say to pupils, make sure your work is WOW folder worthy. So pupils are very eager to get their work into the WOW folder, and they always do ask. So recently, with my year eights, I was doing some show not tell creative writing. One of the students read out her work. She was very kind of proud of it. I gave her like a merit for it. So that's 3 praise points. And then I said, that's amazing, that's brilliant. Like, I gave her lots of verbal praise, the class were buzzing. And even after giving her the merit, she said, will that be going in the WOW folder then? And I was like, of course
Oh,
it's going in the WOW folder. So
oh,
definitely it's set a standard.
I love that, Zainab. And considering, that having high standards is, one of the teacher standards, or as
Mm,
part of the teacher standards, setting like high standards for students. I think this is the nicest example that I know. Like, it's so cute that children care about whether or not you're going to showcase their work, which I think leads really nicely onto my next question, which is, what does it take for a
mm.
pupil's work to be featured in it? Like, when do you look at a piece of work and think,
Yeah.
this is going in my wow folder?
Yeah. I think it's about creativity. I think it's about having an exceptional response to the task. It's about having your words should have like a very visceral impact as well. Also, I let peers decide as well. So if a pupil has read out their work and peers have a certain response to a piece of work, that shows me that the work is wow folder worthy. So like round of applause, or like lots of students, making verbal comments about something they liked about in particular. I think you just know when it's wow worthy because there is that buzz, and it's kind of above and beyond, and it's kind of never been done before.
Oh, that's honestly amazing, Zainab. Like, I just love that wow folder so much. I can't I can't stop saying it. I love it
Thank
so much,
you.
and I can only imagine the impact it has on the students in your class. Have you ever taught like maybe siblings, where you've taught an older sibling, and then obviously I know you have been teachers now,
Mm.
but I mean, have you ever had like an older sibling whose work has been featured in the wow folder, who's then had, maybe you've taught like their younger sibling who's come into the school, um in later years, and then have you ever had siblings or
Mm.
work
Good
that
question. Good question. It hasn't happened yet, and also there are so many pieces in the WoW folder. Maybe if a sibling is flicking through, they haven't like recognized their older siblings on. But it would, yeah, maybe next time I know that I'm teaching younger sibling, I can be like, oh, so and so's work is in the WoW folder. Have a look. maybe I need to make a concerted effort to do that.
Oh
But
no,
that would be really
so
empowering.
much. So much. Also, guys, I just remembered when I looked at those wow folders in her classroom, each page, that it was put in like a meticulous order, but also each page had a label. So it would say something like, this storyboard was created by a year 7 student in 2019, or something like that, on the edge of the work as well. So, like, honestly, I felt like I was in a museum. Like, when you're looking through it, it had, like a short bio, or like something to kind of give you a bit of context as to how that ended up in there. And it was just so cool to just read through it and just kind of flick through. And also, it's not just one folder. She had multiple folders just to give context for how much work she shares. So another question I had for you, Zainab, is, have any pupils ever surprised you?
Do you mean in the context of the wow folder?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to say surprise, because that would kind of be doing a disservice to pupils, and I never want to make assumptions about what they're capable of. So I'm going to say impressed. So I think there was this one piece one of my students wrote in year 9, and they were writing a letter from the perspective of Wilfred Owen. So they were like using one of his poems as a springboard. And this pupil was one of my kind of weaker pupils, and usually kind of needed one-to-one support and scaffolding. So there was like a rough scaffold on the board. And I thought, okay, I'm going to let him get going with the task, and then I'll check in. But when I checked in, he had completed like so much of it without completed the letter, so much of it, like a significant chunk, without using any of the scaffold. And then like I read it to the class, and we celebrated it. And I gave him like one of my personalized stickers. So it's like, Miss Rabani says this is outstanding work. And then I put it in the wow folder, and that was such a great moment, because that was the first time one of his pieces got put in the wow folder. And again, there was that buzz that he had such a creative response to the task and didn't need kind of any of the support, and especially when he is one of my weaker pupils who usually does need a lot of one-to-one support. So that was a really, really beautiful moment, and a moment that deeply impressed me.
Oh, Zainab, that's honestly so lovely to hear. Like, I love these wow folders so much. The next question I have for you: what do you tell students in order to motivate them? Like, I know you are by nature a very motivating person. You're very positive. You've always got great things to say about everybody, both students and staff. I just wanted to ask, what do you tell students in order to motivate them?
I usually make it clear to them how much I believe in them, and I always highlight their creativity and how remarkable they are. And I always say to them, remember that piece you wrote, or remember that speech you delivered. I also speak to them about life outcomes. So with my tutor group, I'm always having conversations with them about reading and its importance. And I speak to them, I don't just tell them, oh, it's very important that you're doing accelerated and you're reading, but I speak to them about how, reading's the only intervention which works, and so much research has backed this up. And then I tell them, things like tuitioning has limited impact, for example. And I speak to them about what reading did for me, and how it opened up worlds for me, and how it opened up language. I speak to them about the kind of books that I love, the kind of books that shaped me. So a lot of positivity, and explaining the why behind the need for doing something, I feel goes a long way.
Oh, amazing. And so, what advice would you give to any English teachers out there who want to start their own wow folder?
First of all, thank you so much, Yasmin, for like championing the wow folder. I think you're the most enthusiastic person. In terms of advice, I would say start photocopying those exceptional pieces of writing. It doesn't always have to be writing. It can be, as I said, storyboards, posters. I think it's important to celebrate, as I said, not just the written word. And I would say, from experience, the photocopying needs to be done immediately. Otherwise, you do forget and you kind of lose track. So when a pupil reads an exceptional piece of work in class, I'll just make a note in my planner that I need to take that book in and photocopy it at the end of the day, and then just like put it in a wallet immediately, put it in the appropriate section as well. So I say to teachers, get some binders, get some plastic wallets, and really give those folders and the pupil work status and just celebrate it.
Oh, honestly, Zainab, like, honestly, it's really, really cool. Like, it's honestly really inspired me, like, as a science teacher. And obviously, like, science isn't like English in the sense that there aren't many opportunities to do a lot of extended writing. But as you said, it doesn't just have to be writing. Like, my thing in teaching was posters. I love posters. I love color. Like, I used to have a lot of posters on my classroom door, and when I took them down in the summer when I was leaving the school, I took them with me. And I did intend to put them up in my new school, but then I so far haven't, because they've got people's names on them, and I just thought maybe it's a little bit weird to have posters up with their names. So I have considered cutting off the names, but I love the posters so much, so I've actually got them at home. And like, I just can't let go of them. I love them so much. But your Wow book is just another level, and I can just imagine how much it inspires your students. And thank you for sharing that advice. It's advice that I also intend to take on. So I wanted to also ask you, why is it important to champion the work of students?
I think it's important to champion pupil work because these are our most creative minds, and frankly, they have better ideas than many adults do. Like, even so many English teachers struggle with creative writing. Laughing emoji there. I think it's true though, right? I think as adults, we're so kind of limited, and we're not idealistic or creative, and we definitely have these kind of limitations around us. So yes, they have better ideas than adults do. I'll just say that. And they are going to be the artists and the writers and the engineers and the politicians of tomorrow. So we need to champion them, because if we don't channel and celebrate and foster that exceptionalism, that is potential that we are allowing to be lost. And that's actually a tragedy for all of society, because I might have the next William Shakespeare in my class for all I know. So I need to make sure that I am championing and celebrating every single child. That's so paramount to me.
I love that, Zainab. I love how you just said that's a tragedy to society. I love that. You are such an English teacher. I love that. And I do hope in the future that there is somebody who's come out of, Miss Rabbani's class who goes on to be, a really successful author or writer or, poet or something really substantial in wider society. And I hope that when I like flick through the front of their book, you are like listed as one of the people that it's dedicated to. Like, I really hope you get to see that time. You really deserve it.
Thank you.
So the next question I have for you. So I know that you're working in the same school that you went to, but what was your time at school like? And did you have any inspirational teachers that have inspired you today?
I had a phenomenal time at secondary school, and I have so many inspiring teachers, and I could write a whole PhD thesis for each of them. Honestly, I wish I could be even like a fraction of what they were and what they were to me. So I think of my legendary GCSE teacher, Mr. Hines, who is now my colleague. And again, he just opened up so many worlds for me. Like, I just think of his lessons, and there was such little teacher talk. The emphasis was always on our ideas, and I think about how he brought Shakespeare to life, and he really made me appreciate the human condition. For example, when we were looking at the character of Iago, like, we really delved deeply into what makes us jealous, how can language be used to exploit, how can we look out for manipulators in our own lives, in what way is Iago Machiavellian. Let's all of these amazing theories and all of these amazing ideas. And I remember we had this whole lesson on like Othello's tragic flaw, and we considered how noble qualities can be our downfall. And those are just the conversations that you'll never forget. I also think of my fantastic drama teacher, Miss Dowling, who I had for 4 years at Lister. And again, a lot like Mr. Hines, she just opened up worlds for me, introduced me to amazing literature. Like, even the way she spoke about literature, I remember her mentioning The Great Gatsby and how it's one of her favorite novels, and immediately I went off and read The Great Gatsby And from there on, I just loved American literature so much, and I think if Miss Dowling hadn't mentioned this or that, like, I wouldn't be the person that I am today, or I wouldn't have read the books that I did read today, or I just would not be the person that I was today. So a massive shout out to those two inspiring teachers, but I had many more, many more.
That's so lovely to hear, Zainab. And have you ever been able to contact this Miss Dowling?
Oh yeah, all the time. I'm still in contact with her. As soon as I left, I said everything to her. Like, I told her about the books that I've been reading, how much I loved Revolutionary Road, which is a book that I discovered after reading The Great Gatsby, because I did some more research into, like, books that I like The Great Gatsby. I told her how I read Jude the Obscure, which again is another book that she mentioned that so fleetingly, but the way she spoke about it, I felt so moved, and I felt so motivated to read this book. And again, that was like that inspired me to go and read other Thomas Hardy novels, and inspired my love for classical literature as well, and particularly 19th century literature. And just over the years, I've kept in contact with her, and I give her little updates. And when I started working at Lister, I told her, just what she meant to me, what an inspiring teacher she was, and I hope that I could be just a little fraction of what she is. So she's well aware of what an inspiration she was to me and countless others.
That's just so sweet. Like, there's just something so special, right, about being able to reach out to the teachers that inspired us. I'm sure I've told you this before, Zainab, but like at school, my most inspiring teacher was called Mr. Leveson. Like, that man helped me so much in my life. He helped with my cultural capital. He was like my referee for my first, I think, 6 jobs in adulthood. Just did so many things for me. And when I went to his funeral last year, like, I was just so overcome with emotion because I could never put into words how thankful for him I was. But also, in every year of adulthood, I used to I used to go back to my old school and just chase him around with thank you cards that I'd written for like no reason all the time. So like, I did find a lot of comfort in knowing, well, actually, at least I've told him how much he meant to me, how thankful I am, and that's kind of helped me with the grieving process. But it's so nice to hear, and I'm so happy that you were able to reach out to her. And but also, you did say that you currently work with your former English teacher, Mr. Hines, said. So I just wanted to ask you, what's it like working with, and I know that he wouldn't be the only one, but what's it like working with people that used to teach you? Like, is it a struggle? Because I have on Twitter, a lot of my old teachers have found me, or I found them on Twitter. I still struggle. At my first radio show, I interviewed a head teacher called Mu'min Humayun, but I couldn't stop calling him Mr. Humayun, because he taught me when I was 11. But what's that like?
I think because even as my teachers, when I was a student, there was just this level of equality, like obviously professionalism, but they were people who believed in me. There's no kind of, they didn't feel like there was like a power imbalance, and I feel the same here. It feels very natural to be working alongside my ex-teachers. I feel very comfortable, and they just continue to inspire me. I love working side by side with them and just learning from them, and because obviously I've really enjoyed their lessons and felt so inspired. Like, I love popping into their lessons and kind of unpacking what it is that they're doing, because they had such an impact on me. So I think, okay, now as an observer, I need to kind of look at what are they doing, like what are they doing that was so inspirational, and how can I then do that in my own classroom.
Oh, that's honestly so lovely. I just keep awing at everything that you say. I love that. So I wanted to ask you, what barriers would you say that students face at school when it comes to succeeding in English at GCSE, or just in English as a subject in general? Like, it could be EAL, it could be deprivation, though I generally don't really like the words like deprivation or disadvantage. Like, what would you say are the barriers that students face?
I think a barrier is actually the tasks required by pupils to complete. So I've been talking a lot about like things like knowledge and personal response or creativity, and I would argue that the English exams as they are now, they're not kind of assessing knowledge or personal response or creativity. So the poetry comparison question is a good example of this. So for their poetry exam, they have to compare 2 poems for us from the Power and Conflict anthology, right? And I would argue that comparing two poems which have no relationship to each other just ought not to be a requirement. Like it's no use comparing Ozymandias to My Last Duchess, right? They're not even part of the same movement. They're not written by the same poet. I just think it's an absurdity. And with that question, it's not requiring you to be creative. It's not requiring you to have a personal response. It's requiring you to tick certain boxes, right? Both Ozymandias and My Last Duchess convey how power can be abused. Here's how they do it. Like it's just there's something so um, tokenistic about asking a question like that. So I would say if we're going to get students to succeed in English, we do need to have like a more knowledge-based curriculum that values the personal response, that requires creativity, and values those two things as well, the personal response and creativity.
Yeah, honestly, that's so lovely to hear. And it reminds me a lot of what Sarah was saying earlier about, how she's tried to pick texts that the students can relate to,
Mm,
a wider kind of societal
mm,
level. Um, so, it's really good to hear about that. So I wanted to
mm.
ask you next, do you have any plans for where you would like your teaching career to take you?
I would very much just like to remain in the classroom, and I just want to keep fostering that love for English, and just be an outstanding teacher of English in the widest sense of the word. So those are my immediate plans. I'm not kind of Machiavellian enough to have long-term plans.
Oh, what a funny way to put it, Zainab. But that's very humbling and inspiring to hear. And just really quickly, just a few more questions.
Mm,
Is there any advice you'd have for, like, what have you learned? Because I asked Sarah this, and I'd
mm.
really like her response. What have you learned in your teaching career?
I've just learnt that each day is magical and you just need to embrace it, and you just need to be constantly positive. And as I said, know that you're not going to be everything to everyone, and you just need to accept that, and do the best that you can for every single human being under your care.
Oh, that's such an inspiring. I feel like everything. See, this is what I meant at the start when I said you're so positive. Honestly, I love that. Like all your answers
Thank
are just
you.
so positive. And what advice would you give to ECTs that I know you are friends with a lot of ECTs. I know
Mm,
you've supported a lot of friends who've been training.
mhm,
Um, what advice would you give to ECTs in any subject really that want to succeed as a
mm,
classroom? Because I know, in particular, I know that quite a few English ECT teachers plan to listen to this later today.
mm. I would say work on your subject knowledge. Have a real passion for what you are teaching, and the material at hand, and really know your stuff. I would say seek advice from more experienced colleagues as well. And I think just work on fostering those positive relationships, and just going where the lesson takes you as well. Don't feel like you need to kind of stick to this rigid structure. Like, just I think just embrace those moments, those tangents. That's just going to make your kind of first couple of years of teaching really magical.
Oh, that's honestly so lovely. Really, really lovely to hear. I know that a lot of people are going to listen back to this. Is there anything that you now do differently in teaching, or anything that you now do that you wish you'd been advised to do as an ECT?
Um, I would say I have more like a flexible approach to my lessons. I think when I first started out, I cared more about. Uh, I think the creativity was there, but I was interested in pacing, and I think I used to um, give give a model answer, like a teacher written model answer for everything. But I think now I feel more confident about live modeling, and it's okay to not give something perfect and pre-packaged to my classes, because I remember with my first ever year 10 class at Lister, there was a model for everything. Like, even if it was the most basic question, there'd be like sentence starters, there'd be an entire model, and it's like you do it. But now I feel more I feel like actually it would be more beneficial for them to see the process live, and I'll do it on the whiteboard, And even though it might not be perfect as the kind of pre-packaged model, at least it does feel like they are learning more and they're seeing the process, and it's kind of more beneficial for them cognitively. So I think in that way I have transformed.
Oh, and so Zainab, if somebody wanted to start a WOW folder, I'm going to start one definitely for 2023. That's going to be my teaching New Year's resolution. Definitely going to start one at the Peru that I'm in. I just wanted to ask you, where would you recommend, for anyone who listens to this later, where would you recommend buying folders? What would you say are the best? What's the best stationery shop?
Oh, good question. You know what? I like a classic WH Smith, so that's where I got my binders from, and they're pastel coloured. I'm sure Paper Chase have got some great folders / binders, but yeah, I stick to WH Smith for my binders, and also just having like that pastel colour as well. Like, it's very soft. It feels like a celebration. So WH Smith would be my recommendation.
That's great. Then I guess that's where I'm going to be going to get my binders as well, so that I can start with at least one WOW folder. I hope to have one finished by the end of the year. I think it will be nice to get some buy-in with the students. I found in Peru's that, I mean, the children are really similar to mainstream in the sense that they do care about their work being showcased. They do care about your praise a lot. So, you know, now I've kind of got, I'd say, all of the students on side. They all actually come to their science lessons now. It would be nice to start working on projects with them where I can actually showcase their creative work, with the exception of year 11s who have decided to enter for GCSEs this year. So everyone else, though, I'm going to get them on board, and I will be sure to send you photos.
Amazing. I can't wait.
So Zainab, honestly, I wanted to thank you so much. I'm going to continue shouting about your WOW book. I love it.
Thank you for being such an advocate.
Honestly, I love it so much, and I think I feel like I should stop saying it. I've said it so many times. I'm sure my enthusiasm for it has come across.
I appreciate your enthusiasm.
But Zainab, it's honestly testament to the fact that it's just such an amazing idea. You know, it even includes technically a teaching standard, as I said earlier, you know, having high expectations, but in such a positive and inspiring way. Like, I think I've said this to you before, but I wish I'd been a student. I'm older than you, so this makes no sense, but I wish I'd once been a student in one of your lessons. I think I would have loved it. So thank you so much for being so inspiring, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I will pass on to you the comments from the English teachers that listen to this later today that unfortunately weren't available this morning, but I know they will play this back. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And everyone else, thank you so much for having joined today, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks to Tom. Thank you, Tom, for hosting.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.